Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.
I think that, any Hispanic candidate who's going to be running in Canyon County needs to understand that if he is to be elected, he needs to be a representative for all the people and not only one people.
Tonight, Hispanic political power. How effective is it? Good evening. Mark Johnson has the day off. I'm Jean McNeil. In 1980, more than a third of the nation's Hispanic voters chose Ronald Reagan, a somewhat surprising response from a group often assumed to be part of the hardcore Democratic coalition. Now, 4 years later, both parties are courting the Hispanic vote harder than they ever have before. And there's a good reason for that. Spanish surnamed Americans are the nation's fastest growing ethnic group and are expected to be the largest racial minority in the country by the year 2000. The West in general, and Idaho in particular, have large numbers of potential Hispanic voters. The U.S. Census says there are 39,000 in Idaho, but some observers put the figure much higher than that, perhaps even as high as 90,000. Whatever the number, it's enough to constitute a political force to be reckoned with, particularly in Ada and Canyon counties, the Magic Valley, and parts of eastern Idaho. Tonight we'll take a look at Hispanic political power, beginning with producer Bruce Reichert's report on a legislative race in Canyon County.
When we think of Hispanics in Idaho, this is the picture that usually comes to mind. Migrant workers laboring long hours for low wages under the hot sun. And it is true that most of the 15,000 Hispanics in the Idaho labor force are engaged in some form of farm activity. But while some may see only the potential for cheap labor among Hispanics, there are others who see something else. They see the largest untapped voting bloc in the state.
We want to participate, and we want our fair share of jobs, of opportunities, no more, no less.
Camilo Lopez is a Caldwell attorney. He's a Democrat, and he is also the only Hispanic in Idaho running for a seat in the Idaho legislature.
In Canyon County, it means that approximately about 18,000 are here. Of those, we feel we've got a voting block of about somewhere 4,500.
Lopez got into the race after the state's controversial new reapportionment plan radically altered the political landscape of Canyon County.
We're telling Hispanic, if your streets and here toward the older part of town where the streets are still dirt streets, where maybe they don't get, that's why, because you haven't gone out and done something about it. And so we're saying to folks, if you're going to sit there and continue to just complain, it isn't going to do any good. You're going to have to go out and participate and get people elected that will pave your streets, that will get you the services you need.
In the last election, the legislative districts in Canyon County looked like this, with candidates competing in one of 4 districts. That split the county's large Hispanic population and, according to the Idaho Supreme Court, diluted their strength. But this year, the county is not divided, and candidates must run at large. Lopez believes this will give Hispanics more clout.
The concern was that as far as a county as a whole, we had to have enough clout to be able to elect individuals, enough clout to be able to speak as a number.
But it's that kind of talk that bothers his opponent, incumbent Republican Dolores Crow.
Any group, regardless of whether they're Hispanic, Japanese, whatever, I think we do them a disservice when we say, you are over here, we are over here.
Of course, if all the eligible Hispanics in Canyon County were to register and vote, even Crow admits their political clout could be considerable. But the language barrier, fear, and the feeling many Hispanics have of not being welcome in the voting booth have led even his staunchest supporters to say that Lopez is fighting an uphill battle.
So I think that when the Anglo people see that lady's name, and they probably don't know what her qualifications are or what her past record is, and they see this brown mustache person named Lopez running against them, they're going to go with a white person.
But Lopez is optimistic. With a coalition of Hispanics, the county's poor, and the elderly, He
I'm not
figures
the
he can
person
win.
ignored. I'll be there even if I have to trump through the door. And they're not going to push me out, and they're not going to keep me quiet. And that's what I'm saying to Kane County voters. Just because I'm brown doesn't mean I'm just going to represent brown. If anything, just because I'm brown, I'm going to be able to represent the Anglo community even better because I know the problems, I'm sympathetic, I've suffered. And I don't want anybody to suffer as I have.
In recent years, Hispanic leaders have become sophisticated about forging the kinds of political coalitions Lopez talks about, and they have also seen a need to educate the public about the Hispanic community. Jesse Bahrain is the president of Image of Idaho, a group formed, among other things, to do just that. Mr. Bahrain, at this point, Camilo Lopez is alone. There have been no Hispanics holding statewide office, very few in county levels, only one in the history of the legislature. Why has it taken till now to get Hispanics to run for office in this state?
First of all, like any emerging minority, in this case we're speaking about Hispanics, it takes a growth process, an awareness that the political system does impact their everyday life. And this awareness starts out when we are being asked to go out to the community and get people to register to vote for other political candidates. And as you go into this type of a process, pretty soon you figure out why we also have some viable political candidates that could run for office and represent our interest just as well as we have in the past. So it is an emerging type of process that every minority group goes through. And I think today we are at a very special type of plateau where we are having minorities say, hey, I can run and I can win. Camilo Lopez has run in the past. He has the name identification. He's an attorney. He knows the community, the total community. And I think he's a viable candidate for office.
What about the woman in the videotape? Is she right that people will look and see a brown man with a mustache named Lopez and automatically vote against him?
I don't think so. I think they will look at the individual, how he articulates the issues that affect the total community. And if that candidate, regardless of who that candidate is dealing with the issues of the community in a viable, articulate way, that he will get votes from all segments of the community.
You trust Idaho voters to judge the person?
Very much so. They're intelligent voters, and I believe that they'll express it at the polls.
Is he right that the new reapportionment plan and voting county-wide helps Hispanic strength in Canyon County?
I think, in my opinion, it does. But there seems to be several candidates that had been in office that possibly do not think so. So I think we have to take a kind of a wait-and-see attitude towards these oncoming races and find out really how it works.
Finally, Mr. Bahrain, a political columnist in Idaho last year took both parties very much to task for essentially ignoring you. Is that a fair charge?
In my opinion, it is.
Why has that been?
The Democrats, in my opinion, have taken us for granted.
You can't go anywhere else, so you'll stay with them.
Precisely. They feel like they're dealing with the type of issues that we have concerns with, social programs and the like. The Republicans have totally ignored us for some reason or reasons. I feel like as our numbers grow, and as you indicated at the initial part of your presentation, they run computers, they run numbers, and they know that the numbers are going to be there in the future. We're one of the fastest growing identifiable populations in the whole country.
So they'll have to pay more attention.
Precisely.
Thank you. We'll come back in just a minute. I mentioned earlier that Hispanic voters are often presumed to be Democrats, and indeed many of them are. But in increasing numbers, they are turning up in the Republican Party as well, and in both camps, they're being given high visibility. Gladys Escobar is a paralegal for Idaho Legal Services in Burley. Last month, she was a delegate to the Republican National Convention in Dallas. Mrs. Escobar, you heard Jesse Burain say that the Republican Party has completely ignored Hispanics. You're a Republican. Why?
I think because we have not become visible, we have not become involved, we have not become a part of a political party. I think the Republican Party is very much aware of the situation today, is very much a caring party in terms of wanting to reach out. This was very evident at the convention. There were 167 Hispanic delegates. We had Hispanic caucuses. We met with President Reagan and Vice President Bush, and we met with one of the top appointees, Hispanic treasurer, Catherine Ortega. More and more we, as Hispanics, have wanted to become involved in the political arena. The party on the other side has become aware that there is a definite need of awareness and involvement on the part of Hispanics.
So you didn't feel, as some have charged, that both parties really were using Hispanics and women and blacks as window dressing at their conventions? You felt like more than window dressing.
I feel that it is up to the individual to allow to be used or not to be used. I choose to think that we were not used, that we were there for a purpose, and that we have a purpose in politics.
The Reagan administration supports, for example, new immigration legislation that a lot of Hispanics oppose. You mentioned Treasurer Catherine Ortega. She's very visible, but it's not a policy position. The Republican platform is silent on civil rights issues. Do those things bother you?
No. Like I said, I think that we are very visible. I think that we are showing what the needs of the Hispanic community are. It is probably a slow step in coming about, but it is a reality. I think Idaho is very much aware. We have had Hispanics involved in the Republican Party in Idaho, and to me that is an indication that they do care.
Finally, is Mr. Burain right when he says that the Democratic Party has tended to take Hispanics for granted on the theory that you hear all the time that basically no place else to go?
I think the Democratic Party has assumed that the Hispanic population is automatically Democrat, and therefore they do not have to cater or answer or address their needs.
Thank you. We'll come back in just a moment. In Colorado, Hispanics have had considerable success in consolidating political power. Just last year, in a campaign that was reportedly notably unmarked by any racist overtones, the city of Denver elected its first Hispanic mayor. Leo Cardenas lives in Denver. He is the regional director of the Community Relations Service in the U.S. Department of Justice and also the editor of a new Hispanic magazine, Latino. Mr. Cardenas is in Boise for a conference put on by Image of Idaho. Let me ask you first about the Denver mayor, if I might, Federico Pena. In a city 18% Hispanic, how did he win?
He was able to put together a coalition of organizations, and perhaps the greatest thing that he did was extend a hand to those who normally are not asked to join the political forces of a city. He extended the arm to various community groups. He extended the arm to women. And then, once elected, then he assured that they had the same participation in electing him and assuring that they now have a voice in the city administration.
So the voters in Denver did exactly what Mr. Burain suggests they will do in Canyon County. They voted for the person. They didn't look at a brown face and say, no.
Exactly. In the race in Denver, particularly the runoff that involved the former district attorney, there were no less than 25 face-to-face meetings in which issues were aired, not at City Hall, not necessarily before the League of Women Voters, but in schools, in churches, where the voters were able to come out on their own time and make up their minds. And this was an exercise in the democratic process in which, in my estimate, obviously the better candidate won.
In your view, is the idea that this is the year, that 1984 is the year that the national political parties really begin to take the Hispanic vote seriously? Is that true? Are they doing that?
I believe so. If we take Denver as an example, certainly we can do that. But Denver is only one of 5 cities. It came as some surprise, but it should not be a surprise anymore that we now, of course, have a Hispanic mayor in San Antonio, Hispanic mayor in Miami, similarly in Santa Fe and in Hialeah, Florida, some of the major cities. And we have a deputy mayor, as an example, in Billings, Montana, places where normally we would say the Hispanic voice is not there. It is there.
Each party in the last few months has made at least one very visible effort to court the Hispanic vote. Democratic nominee Walter Mondale putting San Antonio Mayor Henry Cisneros prominently on his list of possible vice presidents. Catherine Ortega, the treasurer, the keynote speaker. Do you see those as cynical moves at all, as tokenism or pandering, or are those substantive kinds of moves?
I believe they're substantive. I don't think that you can extend a hand to a Henry Cisneros with the type of background that he brings, and similarly, you cannot extend a hand to a Catherine Ortega with the type of background, first woman banker in the state of California, second largest, I believe, state in the country. With those types of credentials, people can call it tokenism, people can call it, politically, but these are advances. This is the comeuppance of the Hispanic. We are here today, and we're going to be here tomorrow.
Let me open this up and go back to everybody. Mr. Brain, do you essentially agree that this is the year that politicians will realize how important the Hispanic vote is?
I think it is the first step in what I perceive will be a larger step in the future.
Do all of you, any of you, see the Hispanic community approaching a period of civil rights activity comparable, let's say, to the Black Civil Rights Movement in the 60s? Is that what we're going to see in the 80s?
We have moved, we as a nation have moved from protest in the streets to a quiet, subtle protest across the table. It comes in the form of political action. It comes in the form of more involvement in the economic of this nation. As an example, Hispanics today comprise some $80 billion in consumer power. The advertising world alone spent some $250 million in 1984 will be spent in this year, and it is anticipated that this particular amount of money for advertising alone is going to increase by another 10–15%. When you put that amount of attention in the media, where it counts the most, the presence of the Hispanic community then is certainly here and here to stay.
So the activity will be there, but not the same type of activity that we saw in the 60s, for example, an economic, political.
It is an economic, political activity. It is a sharing of power that, that was before. We were trying to grab power. Now, we're extending the hand, we're touching it, and we're bringing it in very softly, but very productively.
Mrs. Escobar, do you agree with that?
I definitely do. I think that I lived in Burley, Idaho for the last 20 years. And when we first came to Burley, we had no Hispanics, for example, in the school system. Today we have about 10 in the education department. I think education is the key, and I think Hispanics have recognized that they have to get educated, that this is the only way to become a part of the system. And
I'm glad you raised the education question, because I do want to spend the last few minutes talking about a couple of other things. Let me start with the interim legislative committee that's been meeting on Hispanic issues. What do you hope to see come of that?
We have met with the interim committee twice at our request, Tom Stivers, who is the Speaker of the House, initiated Resolution 40, where they established an interim committee. And I feel very positive about our meeting. We discussed the issues and the concerns that were being expressed to the leadership throughout the state on Hispanics. Education, you mentioned one of them. We also mentioned employment, the high population of Hispanics in the institution.
The prisons.
The prison, in the prison system. Not necessarily all in prison, but in the prison system.
In the penal system.
And the lack of counselors, guards, etc., that are involved there. There were many issues that were brought forth.
You want a permanent commission, do you not?
We want a permanent commission. We also would like to have somebody that works for that commission and identifies. Part of the problem that we found is that we tried to get statistics from all types of agencies, and they varied. They varied from 40,000 all the way up to 100,000. I feel like statistics were being used for whatever purpose people wanted to use those statistics. We feel like that's a very important type of thing that this commission can be addressing.
We're rapidly running out of time. Mr. Cardenas, have you seen that kind of permanent commission work in other places? Is that something Idaho ought to be doing?
I believe so. Whenever any segment of a community is neglected to the degree that it does not have a voice, that it does not have a mechanism of grievance, if you will, and even lack of attention, then that's when you have what you call, the civil rights movement. There is no need for that if that attention is paid from the very top. Neighboring state of Idaho, as an example, has special assistance for Hispanics, for blacks, for Asian and Indians, as an example, on a permanent basis. And so these are the people that go throughout the state, talk to the people involved, and see that those problems and concerns are addressed when they need to be addressed.
You mentioned education. Would that be your #1 priority as an issue for such a commission to take a look at?
Education, yes, in different fields, though. I think that we have to address the housing issue. Any issue that deals with Hispanics, I think, should be a concern to the commission.
What issues are on your mind most prominently?
I think education is possibly one of the most concerns that were expressed to me from the leadership throughout the state. The main concern there is that 80% of the Hispanics never finish high school. If we had any other identifiable segment of the community that had that serious a problem, we would be scrambling to find the reason, we would be scrambling to find the money to try to overcome those kind of deficiencies in our educational system.
We have about 30 seconds left. Would you like the last few words on that subject? How about issues? What's important to you?
I believe the most important issue facing the Hispanic community is jobs. Not only at the beginning, but certainly jobs at the middle and upper levels. We are still dearly missing at those particular, and unless we're in a decision-making process, our progress can be there in numbers, but certainly will not be substantive, and this is what we're talking about. We just need to be in the right position at the right time in order for this progress to continue.
Thank you. We are just about out of time. I'd like to thank all three of you, Leo Cardenas, Gladys Escobar, and Jesse Bahrain, for being with us tonight. That's all the time we have for tonight. We'll be back here on Monday night. I'm Jean McNeil. Good night.
Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.